Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining again today on the Road to Cyber. My name is David Evenden. I'm the owner and founder of Standard User Cybersecurity. And today on the Road to Cyber, we're going to talk about what to expect in your AV or what to expect in your antivirus. So, antivirus, of course, being what you might install locally on a workstation, whether or not it be a Mac or Linux or Windows workstation, laptop, CPU unit, whatever it is. And those installed endpoints or antiviruses generally offer protections for your local computer as a end user interaction, helping secure you from files you might download, things that you might browse to, attacks that you might see come across the wire, or so on and so forth. So there's an entire ecosystem of levels of expectations of what your antivirus does. And there's obviously, of course, there's tons of different antiviruses and solutions. Just to clear it up, the sake of this conversation, we're not going to talk about the differences in what which antivirus might be the best, and so on and so forth. I know that you could say, well, this one does that, this one does that, but we don't want to get into the semantics of that. And so we're just going to leave those alone. All antiviruses have their different benefits, and we don't want to be telling everybody to use this specific antivirus for this solution configured like that. We're going to talk about the generalities of how they can be configured. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Again, majority of our talks are based around existing blogs that are up, and this one is on Pentest Mag and is a section of Advanced Virtual CISO for remote teams. So what's a process of that? Do pen testing, do compliance and security. One of those portions are the installation of an antivirus. So one thing that you need to understand is that an antivirus is only as good as really the original environment it's installed in. If there's known signatures or known bad stuff in an environment, of course it's going to catch those. But if you install a baseline for an antivirus and that baseline consists of malware or bad content that has not previously been seen, then that's going to always be identified as good. And so understanding and configuring the initial baseline in a pure form will help identify potentially malicious traffic as your time goes on. So what does that mean? It means that if you have a clean install and a clean baseline of a specific workstation, so you have one workstation, there's no additional applications installed on there. Let's just say, for instance, you're a developer or you work in finance and you need these different tools installed on your computer in order to do certain types of activity. You can take that tool set and add it to a list of approved processes. Often these are called whitelists and blacklists. I actually did put whitelist in here, but I don't always love using those, and I probably shouldn't have. But approved and disapproved processes. Really, if you put on an approved process for different groups of activities, so if you're in finance, you have an approved list of processes and applications you're allowed to have running. And if you work in application development, or if you work in, SCADA systems or whatever it is that you might be doing, you need different tools. Not every user needs every tool. So I would, as we get down further in the explaining how you would install this, I would suggest applying different GPOs for different sets of approved lists. So it does kind of become a little bit harder to manage. So you might just need to say, hey, these are provable, our list of approved processes. Doesn't really matter who you are or what you're doing. So on demand and scheduled target scans. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we get on this, so in the approved lists, you can have applications, you can have processes, you can have registry keys. If you need something that's configured as an auto run, you can also take those executables, and remember an executable is just a .exe or a clickable, application that will run an application for a clickable file that will run an application for you. And those have particular hashes, file size, and should be run from certain locations. You can configure all of those as previously approved. You can only run this application if this file has this hash, is this big, and lives in this environment. If it doesn't meet those requirements, the antivirus is not going to run it. Well, out the gate, it is going to run it. You have to configure those as a best practice process. Sometimes, if you're allowing users to install their own applications and tool sets, that does inhibit business continuity. But as a best practice, really inhibiting where you're able to run processes from, which processes, and their file hashes, and where they've been downloaded from, and so on and so forth. That's really a best practice there. So configuring that appropriately is good. So your antivirus should also be allowed to run specific scans. If you want to run targeted scans, scheduled scans, immediate scans, I'm seeing some type of weird activity and I need to be able to go in and do a scan right now, or so on and so forth. So antiviruses should have, say for instance, they're tied to a specific company. That company should have its own threat intelligence feed that is fed into your antivirus, and it should be born off of those signatures. Now, as a general rule in the InfoSec space, signature-based antiviruses are not really that good. They're not like the cream of the crop, because majority of the time adversaries are not going to reuse those same tool sets. Now, of course, if you're using some type of Metasploit or interpreter, veil, payload, of course, that antivirus is going to catch that because it knows what to look for. And so you're really targeting on script kiddies and that type of environment from a signature-based antivirus perspective, which is good. So it's not for loss, but really you do want to ensure that on top of just signature-based antivirus, that your antivirus does do more heuristic-based analytics. And so what that might look like is real-time malware protection. What that means is, and we'll kind of I'll jump through here so we don't go through each one of these. What that might mean is if a particular piece of malware is doing something like process hollowing or process migration, or injecting itself into memory address space utilized by a different running process, it actually is able to identify and target that. Additionally, if you're running in a specific memory address space of another process and then running like CMD shell or running regular commands, that's a type of heuristic that an antivirus should be able to catch. So application hardening, well, let's start up here. So anti-process hollowing and orphan process capabilities, which we'll talk about a little bit. Real-time exploit and fileless attack protection. So again, that's really memory address-based manipulation and running shell code. If you need more information on what shell code is, you can look at the last episode of Road to Cyber, where we talk about shell code in the wild. And then sort of moving through there again, what real-time ransomware protection is. Again, that's really understanding what encryption processes are used, if a specific type of encryption is about to be utilized against a file system, knowing whether or not you're doing a 72-hour backup and be able to actually, if you see this type of process and everything is encrypted, being able to read that and say, okay, this looks encrypted, I need to back up from 10 minutes ago when I just did this. And if you do back that up, it'll clean your system for you. That's the plan. Sometimes it doesn't work, but for the most part, as long as you're doing some type of backup and you can recover from that backup, that's a good real-time ransomware protection. So web browsing protection, what does that mean? Well, we talked about signatures just a second ago. What is a signature? A signature generally is a type of string that has been identified as malicious. That string can be a DNS name, a website, can be a particular piece of a website, whether or not you have some type of embedded iframe, and that iframe is redirecting to a known bad website. So not just the website you're browsing to, but a website that the website is forcing you to. It's a little bit complicated, but you're getting the idea. So it's web browsing protection. Hey, I'm watching what you're doing and I'm protecting you from here and there. Local antiviruses aren't able to do that as they sync to your running processes, which are Chrome or iExplorer or Firefox or so on and so forth. So application hardening, again, this is doing queries on what applications are running and ensuring that those most, I guess, how do you say that? The most up-to-date versions of that application is installed on your system. And if it's not, you open it up, it might tell you, hey, you're about to run this application, but it's not the most up-to-date or patched version of this. You need to update this before you're allowed to run it. Pardon me. Additionally, for local patches of the operating system, it can actually prevent you from communicating with the rest of the network until your antivirus is up to date and your computer and system is fully patched and up to date. So anomaly detection, what does that mean? Generally speaking, this user only utilizes specific portion or a specific amount of RAM and running processes and how quickly is it being computed. And then that's been the case for the last 3 weeks because he's only been operating for 3 weeks, him or her. And now in the last 24 hours, we're seeing a 200% increase on utilization of RAM and memory address space processing compute power. So that can be anomaly detection. Additional anomaly detection might be the initiation of an untrusted process from a trusted process, or the initiation of an untrusted process from an untrusted process. That's a little bit confusing too, but in case you're more advanced and you understand what that means, that's additional anomaly detection that you might be able to trigger on. Payload analysis, of course, this just basically means, again, if you're injecting a piece of shellcode into memory and then you're doing some type of a transfer of that payload that allows for you to run additional modules, this will this can view that and actually start to do different types of analysis on that payload to ensure, okay, this actually looks like an update from Microsoft. It's not a backdoor, which might also be Microsoft, but just kidding. So kind of moving on from there, suspicious activity monitoring, which again might just be anomaly detection, but suspicious activity could also be this user is logging in at 2 a.m. when they normally operate between 8 and 5, but 2 a.m. every single night for the last 2 weeks. And that might be a specific piece of like suspicious activity that can potentially trigger on if your AV is configured properly. Cloud sandbox technologies. So again, if you receive an email from somebody, that email has an attachment on it and you're about to open it up, and you do open that, but you say, I'd like to, it might automatically, as I download that onto my local system, the AV might send it to the cloud. Let's just say, for instance, explode or process that attachment, which would then allow for you to identify anything potentially malicious within that that attachment. And so that's Cloud Sandbox technology. It should probably be called CloudBox, but just kidding. So endpoint isolation capabilities. If your AV does identify something in the same way that I just said, if you're not fully patched, or some of your applications might not be updated, or your AV itself is not completely fully updated, it may not allow for you to even communicate with the rest of the network. If you do identify something malicious, or it does identify something malicious, it should break ties with the rest of the network, and you shouldn't be allowed to initiate connections throughout the environment. So that's endpoint isolation capabilities. So centralized management console with threat visibility dashboard, that is a lot of words to say there should be some centralized UI so you can view all AVs in the same spot. API and syslog integration. So if you do want to view additional sysmon capabilities or so on and so forth, that would be a good location to do that, where you can pull and push information from the endpoints. So endpoint log management, I mean, really, we're just talking about the same thing there. On-demand reporting, if I want to run reports, when's the last time everything was updated? When's the last time everything was backed up? When can I see when this is done? Can I run any type of algorithm against all of the endpoints to see, am I viewing something different, even though it may not necessarily be anomalous or suspicious on that particular endpoint compared to the rest of the endpoints in the network? Does it look abnormal? And then asset management integration. So AVs installed on local workstations are a good resource for pulling information back and identifying what resources do you have in the environment in case you don't have an asset management program, you can actually integrate your AV technologies and as an introductory level, integrate your AV technologies to produce an asset management program. I would not encourage you to do that long term, because if you accidentally forget to install an AV on a workstation for whatever reason, then that's sort of a blind spot or visibility gap in your environment. So additionally, ease of access and deployment capabilities. So again, when we talk about that, that really kind of goes back to what I referenced earlier about GPOs. You can configure a GPO within different subsets of your environment. A GPO is a group policy on Active Directory domain controller, where now you have computers in your environment, and that computer is within a specific bucket, if you will, or container. And that container is a group of finance people, a group of developers, a group of whatever else it is that they're doing. And the particular policies assigned to those antiviruses are pushed out via that group policy. And you can actually update the group policy from there. You could do your initial install. And so you might be thinking to yourself, my previous question from the asset management, how would an AV forget to be installed? Well, if your process is AVs are installed by putting that computer into a container that is a group policy, and you forget to drag that into there, it's not actually going to install any type of antivirus on there at all, because you have an automated process. That would be a visibility gap, because you don't have any visibility there at all. So so those are some of the sort of initial features that I would suggest from an endpoint management solution. And if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out, ask anything at all. You go ahead and stop sharing here. Again, you can find this up on here, Pentest Mag Advanced Virtual CISO for Remote Teams, if you have any questions at all. So I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you again, everybody, for joining. I'm going to wait 10 seconds to see if anybody has any questions. Ask those questions now. And I'll talk about something fun. Let me see. I don't know too many fun things. Weather's been really nice here, so that's been really nice. Been running a ton. If you have any other avid runners, awesome. Glad to know you. There's my 10 seconds of wasting time. Awesome. Take care. Thanks for joining again. Bye.